Hello, everybody, and welcome to the MCAS Next Gen math session for this year. Was inspired by Literacy's use of their webinar to convey some of this information. And, since there isn't a whole lot changing, there isn't a whole lot that's going to be different for this year, this seemed to be a more appropriate format to convey all the information. So I hope you like it. Just to give you an idea, this information comes from, I would say, 3 primary sources. One, the webinar that was released about 2 months ago. At that time, not everything was out, so there have been some updates, but some of that information was very useful. Another source of information was a seminar that Nadine Solomon and I attended about 6 weeks ago, which added a lot more information. And then the third source has been, honestly, just the DESE website. Just keeping regular tabs on their resources, trying to stay up on what there is. So that gives you an idea of where the information comes from. And again, I hope that it's useful for you guys. I'm going to use this little kind of dot throughout the presentation just to kind of highlight some little parts. So sit back, hopefully enjoy. Definitely take advantage of the question sheet that I provided as well to provide any insight, questions, inquiries, things like that. I'll try to answer as many as I can while this is happening. Quick questions, and then I'll work to provide you longer answers for ones that have a little more in depth. So hopefully this is informative. So let's start off with some basics. This is much more in line with what you guys are familiar with from the standard MCAS. There will be 2 untimed tests. Untimed, just to kind of clarify that as well, that's a big thing for us. On this assessment, though, both sessions will be non-calculator. I just included the middle school grades as well, just so you can see some of the differences. 7th and 8th, it's going to be 1 calc, 1 non-calc. That impacts the use of the digital tools that they provide, some of the nice little add-ons they have in the software. But for us, grades 3, 4, and 5, we won't have to worry about any of the calculators because they're not needed. One thing they can use is scrap paper. Scrap paper will always be provided, and they'll get a reference sheet, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So that's just the basics. As it is right now, I'm not quite sure if you knew this, but all 4th grade students are mandated to take the online version, the computer-based test. It's really all 4th grade and 8th grade, but for us it only impacts 4th grade. Schools did have the choice, though, to go full implementation of the computer-based test, and both Pierce and Bishop have chosen that. And I know Susan Bisson has been working hard to set up schedules, work with principals, give you guys access to a more substantial practice exam, try to do some stress tests on our wireless network and figuring out all the little issues beforehand. She's been doing a great job. So if you see her, tell her thank you. She's been doing some real great work. She'll be supporting all the schools. Primarily Pierce and Bishop because they'll be going all CBT, but every school will be having some component of a computer-based test, and she will be there to support them. And I'm sure you'll see Laura floating around as well, and the principals will be ready to help out. Basic structure of the test. We'll talk more details as the presentation goes on, but this grid just gives you an idea of the number of questions that count. There are some questions that will be on there that don't count. I'll talk about that in a minute. But these are the questions that count. So, you see in total, a 3rd grade student is going to take or have 34 multiple choice questions, 2 2-point questions, which come, different variety of styles of questions that are asked. No 4-point questions. These are reserved more for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. These get a little more tricky, but they will have 4 open response questions. So a total of 40 questions. These questions, as you can see, vary in points. The open response questions vary in points as well, depending on the grade. And I'll show you a grid for what they are worth in a little bit. But this gives you a basic idea. Again, very similar to past experiences. Predominantly, the kids will be working on multiple choice questions, single point. That doesn't mean that they're easy. It just means that that's going to be a large crux of what the questions are. These are the questions that don't count. Just to highlight the grades 3, 4, and 5, they will have 3 additional 1, 2, or 4-point questions. and I'll have one additional open response questions. So just to kind of go back to do the quick little math, you know, you've got 4 additional questions here for grades 3, 4, and 5. That's added on to the questions that do count. This is a long-standing tradition from the MCAS, which is they're using questions as test of the test items on there. So you've got those. These are your question types. Multiple choice, that is the most standard question that you can see. Select one correct answer from several. That is what we're most commonly used to. 1 point for those. Multiple choice, where you have to select more than one correct answer. These can be a little bit tricky because you actually have to choose the number of correct options to earn the full point. So if there's 2 correct responses, you have to select both of them. That's the only way to get the full point. There's no partial credit. It is an all or nothing kind of thing. You've got, you know, the short answer where you fill in the blank. These essentially are, you know, hopefully it makes sense. They'll give you a little box to put your answer in. You put your either word or number in, and you get 1 point for those. Then you've got the questions that get a little bit trickier. We'll focus in on the 3, 4, and 5. These are only worth 1 or 2 points. These are going to be the drag and drop. I'll show you an example of a hotspot in a little bit. Again, that's only for the computer-based tests. These are questions that take a little bit more construction, a little bit more thought. They're not just going to be choosing one answer, but they're going to be those kind of questions. Yeah. Then at the end, you've got the open response, which have multiple parts. And you can see that they vary in points. You know, just doing a quick thing, an open question for me right now is going to be what the total points will be for the test. Because if they have open response questions that are worth either 2 or 3 points, I'm curious if it will be a set amount that will be the same each year or if it will change. I'm not quite sure of that. That one for me is an open question. All right, so here's an example of a 1-point multi-select item. Just to highlight, and this is kind of a nice little thing. This is similar to what Park had done last year, but this kind of alleviates, hopefully, some of the concern. In the middle school, they would write a question that said, which conversions are correct? Choose all correct. They don't tell you how many are correct. In the elementary school, they're a little bit more leading, so they're going to tell you how many are correct. So hopefully that kind of helps for some of those students who know they have to choose more than one. At least they know how many they have to choose. But to state it again, they have to choose all of the correct answers to earn the full point. This is an example of a single point short answer item. This is quick, it's easy. All you have to do is put the answer in there. This particular one is a number, and please note that they actually give you the units. They have tried to simplify those things, which is nice. So you put a number in. In some of the cases, you may have to put a word in, but in this one, you have to put a nice little numerical answer. And again, they will have scrap paper to do this. And bear in mind, just to restate again, all of these questions need to be answered without a calculator. So there's no calculator that's used. All right. For those of us who will be using the paper-based test, here's the nice little example. If you've seen this before, it's because it was on the Park exam. I didn't say it at the beginning, but I'll say this right now. The state didn't have enough time, really, and they shouldn't have, to totally rewrite and recreate every aspect of the test. So it is hugely, largely, however you want to say it, correlated to the Park exam. So if you already have experience with the paper-based test on the Park, your experience will translate pretty nicely to this. These are examples of how to complete the answer grids. Just to be clear, you really have to make sure that you're bubbling in what you want the numbers to be. There doesn't seem to be much singularity to how you have to put the answer in, but you have to make sure that it's bubbled correctly. Okay. This is how you'd answer a short answer on a computer-based test. Nice little text box. I'm hoping that this is, again, pretty familiar. You're pretty much going to type right in here. You would use the numbers on your keypad, and then with your cursor, you can press any of these, and it will allow you to add some other symbols in. This is the fraction key. This is a mixed number key. You've got the ability to do money, different types of relationships. It's all embedded on there. When you guys do the practice test with your students, and it is the computer-based test, make sure you do give them a chance to kind of work with the text box. And I would highly recommend you guys, at the end of this, you'll have a chance to do the computer-based tests. Even if you're not administering this for a grade that does the computer-based test, I'm sure in the future we'll have to use this, so any type of experience right now would be good. Here's an example of a 2-point item. You'll notice that it's a mixture of different things. In 1 point, part A, you've got to identify the points on the coordinate grid, and you've got to plot them with your A, B, and C. And part B is a pure multiple choice question. For each of these, it's 0, 1, or 2 points. Each one is separate, but it's a 2-point item altogether. They're just 2 parts of the same thing. So that's a nice little example of one. This is something that was similar to Park as well, where you need to actually use a drop-down menu, where they've given you some values. This one, I'll be honest with you, I'm still unsure if this is a 1 or 2-point question. One of the things I've been trying to research, and I'll have a more clear understanding of this in the hopefully near future, is the grades for each of these questions, as well as the amount that this particular question was worth. But this drop-down item is something that your kids will see, similar to Park. Drag and drop. You've got those 3 descriptions at the bottom, and you've got to take the correct statement, the correct expression, and put it inside of there. Pretty simple, pretty hopefully self-explanatory. It doesn't mean that it's an easy question though, but that's something that the kids will be asked to do. And again, I'll look into the point value of this particular question, and then we'll go from there. Line plots. So these do get a little bit trickier. You do need to, you have to actually kind of plot where all of those are and get all of them in the right spots in order to get the questions. This one is probably a 2-point question if I had my guess. I'm not quite sure how the rubric would work in this, but this is a technologically enhanced student answers questions using the technology to fill this in. Definitely a 2-point question. This doesn't fall in the open response style. This would be a nice little 1-point question where it would be a tech enhanced, almost like a drag and drop. But this would definitely be worth 1 point. All or nothing, you've got to place it on the right spot in the number line. And again, I'll get the grades for each of these questions when I have them, just to share with you guys. All right. This one is a nice question. This might be a little bit newer for a lot of you guys. Just take a second and read through. Okay. So here you've got to just use the buttons to kind of indicate and mark off using these fewer, more, reset buttons down at the bottom what the fraction 1/6 would actually be. Nice question. This one I'm not quite sure if it'll be a 1 or a 2-point question. My gut tells me a 1-point question, but it's a nice question. All right. Radio button ones. This is similar to the parking exam. You know, just to say it again, if these questions look familiar, these are the ones the state provided for this year. These were all the practice items for the park last year. So there is a lot of similarity, again, to this test. All of these have to be marked correct for you to earn the points. I believe this was a 1-point question, and this had to be answered totally correctly in order to receive the full points. You just had to mark and check off each one that worked. All right. This is where we get to the open response, and this is where I do think a little bit of practice will pay some dividends. Students will have to become used to using the equation editor down here with the writing inside of the box. Some of these questions do mandate a mixture between writing and words, using symbols, writing things that are mathematically correct. All of your students might have varied experiences with this, depending on some of the software packages they might be using. But this is one that can be worth, for just to say it again, Grades 3, a 2 or a 3-point question, and if this was grade 4 or 5, it could be a 3 or a 4-point question, depending on how much is asked to be written in. So this is, again, just to say it, one of the tougher parts, because kids have to use a mixture between the two. There will be tools that are going to be asked to use. These are the standard rulers. I believe you press on these little buttons and you can move the rules around to measure different shapes. These are available as tools. For those of you who are using the paper-based tests, you will be given rulers. For those of you using the computer-based test, this is going to be a tool that's on there. And since the questions will be on the screen, learning how to use these tools would be beneficial. All right. Test breakdown. So this is each grade, what percentage of the entire assessment will be on different domains. I already gave you the question type breakdown, heavily on multiple choice. But for grade 3, you can see here there's a huge emphasis on operations and algebraic thinking and measurement and data. A good thing to do just in terms of preparation is just to look at those domains in the standards books that hopefully everyone has, or just check online. That's where I usually go. You could actually get a better sense of what some of these expectations are. This one is, again, pretty heavy. 58% of the exam is on 2 domains. That's a lot. In 4th grade, it starts to be distributed a little bit more equally among all the different domains. Geometry still takes a little bit of a backseat. And then finally, in 5th grade, you see there's 2 main numbers and operations in base 10 and numbers and operations fractions. Rightly so. They take up 50%, which is a good chunk, and geometry goes back down to 10%. So this just gives you an idea of, depending on the domain, how many or what type of questions you'll see, which will be good to have. Right. So this is one of those subtle little changes as well. I'm not quite sure if you recall, but Park had 5 reporting categories, and the state is right now playing around with going back to 4. And from what I understand, this is still a debate. They had a couple forums where they were receiving feedback. I know some of the teachers in middle school, high school, some other places have already given some feedback. They're thinking about going back to the 4 descriptors. So these are the first 2. You'll have exceeding and meeting. I prefer those as opposed to advanced and proficient. But if you wanted to have a correlation, that's kind of what it would be. They give a nice little verbal description. And the next 2 are partially meeting and not yet met standards, which sounds a heck of a lot better than warning or failing. It just sounds better to me. But these are the ones that are right now up for debate. I'm sure that there's going to be a decision soon. Some of the information coming out of the state's been a little slower, so I'm not sure when the final determination would be. But I would expect that we go back to a 4-category reporting system. It's not going to perfectly align to what the MCAS version 1, the legacy MCAS, would have as their categories, but I think they're going to go back to 4. This gives you an idea right here of the formula sheet. Again, every grade is going to be given a formula sheet. All students, regardless of performance-based tests, computer-based test or a paper-based test, all students will be given a paper copy of this, just to have. One new little shift, and I highly recommend, these are hyperlinked on the Google Doc that I had shared with you guys. These are the pre-approved graphic organizers. This takes the place of the extra sheet that students could have lobbied to have during the assessment time. For a lot of you guys who have students within special ed or have different kinds of accommodations, this may have been something where it was put together, submitted to the state for approval, and they approved it. What was nice is that you could have tailored things, words, acronyms, little mnemonic devices for that particular student. Now they're creating pre-approved ones. So I highly recommend on the Google sheet that I had shared, it's one of the links at the top. Click on that link Check out your pre-approved graphic organizers for your grades. Hopefully you guys can work with the special ed staff and everyone can work together to just put the students in a good position. I didn't want to go into too much depth here as well, but this is a link, and again, this is on the Google Drive sheet as well. This accessibility and accommodation link goes to all the accommodations for this round of assessments. ELL, special ed, all those little things that you might want to know about that would support students. This is a good place to go, and it is updated. So the next steps. On that Google sheet, I just asked you to fill out a quick little PD survey. If you could, that'd be great. I'm hoping that you guys filled out and wrote any questions on that Google sheet as well. If you haven't, take a minute to do that. What are some open questions that you guys might have, and I'll try to answer them. I'll get you answers in the near future. And then the last thing is just working on the sample problems with your math coach. I sent each of the coaches the grade 3, 4, and 5 paper-based tests. So hopefully they have some copies. I believe they do. I would definitely say go through those. For those grades that are going to be using the computer-based tests, I would say work on that. Getting a feel for the type of interface is pretty important as well. They will be linked on that Google sheet. They're right up at the top. I would say go for it. And then look out for Susan Bisson to be sharing with you some more information about some other practice exams. The other practice exams that Susan will be using are actually on the TestNav platform. So it's going to be a much more realistic version than just these practice tests. These practice tests are really just, again, a rehash of a lot of the questions that were provided in years past regarding PARCC. So you're not going to see much else new with these, but it'll be a good chance to refamiliarize yourself. There are some released questions from last year's exams, things like that. So I hope this was good. I hope this was informative. Take a look at the presentation without the video if you'd like. If I went too fast, I apologize. But feel free to go through that presentation, get some questions to me, and hopefully this works out well. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. Bye.